Hey everyone.
Hi. Are you
It is
staying
just, I'm
warm?
sure since, yeah, I'm just waiting for the dang furnace guy to show up. So I am, I'm just getting everything started. I know it's going to take a few minutes since the meeting just got over. And then I will stay on, but mute myself and turn my video off so that in case the furnace guy comes, I can deal with that while Matt's talking to you guys. So, Matt, or I thought I saw Matt come on, but maybe not. He's downstairs. I should go tell him. All right, hang on one sec. I'm gonna mute myself. So Mandy, what happened to your shower?
Yeah. It's like a valve issue on one of the showers. You know how the valve behind the handle and the whole, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it sucks. What is going on here, man? Oh, yeah, it's everybody's stuff's falling apart.
It's because we're home more. We're
I
using
know
it
exactly. I know, it's so true. And what's crazy is that this weekend we had our air on for that one day. So
Really?
we had our air on because it was hot and it was like we had our windows open and it was getting hot. So we turned our air on. Maybe that was Saturday or Sunday night. And then when we woke up, we turned it off and then flipped the heat back on because it had gotten down to 40 something or 30 something. So, and then last night it went out, I woke up and like, it is really cold in here. So,
well, at least you know the AC works.
I don't know. Yeah, I know, right? For now, for the moment. Okay. Looks like people are slowly getting on, Matt, because the meeting went a little bit over and some people are doing bold. So,
yeah, I'll go.
Okay. So you might just want to give it just a minute. But I'm going to mute myself and turn my video off and you guys Matt can take it away in a few minutes here.
Sounds really good. This is what we'll have to get when we go here.
I'm back.
No.
This thing's getting heck. There we go. We'll give it a couple more minutes and then we can start. Maybe like 3. How's everyone doing?
Good. How are you?
I have no complaints. Life is good. Real estate is good. We're all staying busy.
Yes, very much so.
We could use a working furnace, as Jen mentioned, so that'll be nice eventually here. Which is ironic because we'll talk about furnaces today and we'll talk about roofs, and we're actually getting a new roof from the hailstorm that came through. So we're having all kinds of fun. Yeah. Let's see. We have Jenny, Rebecca, Brian. I suppose some people are on the bold right now too, aren't they? Might limit how many get on. Okay. So last time we just kind of started on like that top 10 list. And really I ultimately had like 13 things on here, and I was going to add one new one because of a recent issue for one of our sellers. So last time we started of basically the top 10 most expensive issues that may come up during a home inspection. I apologize about my hair. I haven't had a haircut in a month and a half. So we went
Pull it back in a
foundation.
ponytail, Matt.
I'm gonna get close. I've not had this hair like this since I was, I don't know, graduating high school and in love with Kurt Cobain. So, all right. So we did foundation, and then as a separate thing, we talked about like drain tile and Palmer valve, and then we had talked about radon. So at the end here, if anyone has questions about those three, we can certainly circle back. So then I'll get back to kind of the list. And I think didn't we read off the rest of the list last time? I think I did. But we'll do roof. So obviously roofs are, as far as home repairs go, one of the most costly things there is. An average roof should run, should live 25 to 30 years. However, I have seen recently that a lot of roofs from like the 98 to 2003 zone. And I think that was when everyone started putting out the dimensional shingles, the architectural shingles. But I have seen a lot of those roofs failing recently on inspections. We've had clients where, they're like, oh no, my roof was just 13 years old. And our roofers are getting up there and all the granules are just crumbling off of them. So it's just something to be aware of if somebody says, they've got a 2001, 2002 roof. And prices obviously for roofs vary wildly. But what, it's quoted by the square, and all I can reference is like my roof. So we just had insurance down. We had that massive hailstorm about 4 weeks ago or so over by us. We had like tennis ball size hail. So we just had an adjuster out. Look at our roof. Our roof is a 9-year-old roof, and it's a brand new house. And it is failed now. So we're going to get a brand new roof. And the quote I got is our roof is about 43 square. And a roof, that's how roofers measure roofs. 43 square also equals about 4,300 square feet. So a square is 10 square feet. And that's going to run us $25,000. And we're about a 2,200 square foot ranch, but we have really high pitches, so we've got a little more roof exposure. But typically, if a buyer is asking you, a roof is a $10,000 to $15,000. Most common, most houses. I don't have a lot of tips on what to look for when you're out with clients. The big things obviously would be if the roof is doing any sort of curling, like duck billing, like a hat brim downward, or the vice versa upward. If shingles are starting to curl, that's a really good sign it's in its last year or two of life. I think that's about it for roofs. You really need a roofer and someone to get up on them, because a roof can look great from ground level. And then when the roofer gets up there, if the gutters are full of granules and you can rub granules off the shingles, then a roof that looks great from the ground, you could find out it fails. So I don't have a lot of big tips as far as, talking to buyers about those. So we'll check that one. Windows is the next one. Windows are incredibly expensive. I think a good average when you're talking to people for, a reasonably standard size window, are $375 to $500. But if you have buyers who have more expensive taste and they're starting to look towards like Andersons and Pellas, then certainly those high-end windows can climb to $800 to $1,000 a window. I do have a chat I have frequently with my buyers when, if they're going to buy a house and say the windows in the house are 25 years old, but they're all functional. And a lot of times buyers will say, well, yeah, but they're old, so I'm going to replace them because we're going to get a better R value, a better insulating value. And people may disagree with me, but from 25-year-old windows to brand new today argon-filled windows, you're only going to increase the R rating kind of incrementally, a few points. And so if they're thinking that they're doing that because there's a payoff on their energy bills, typically if you work the numbers, like they'll save $8 a month. And if you're putting in 15 windows at $500 a piece, you're talking about $7,500. Well, at $100 a year on energy. It's going to take you 75 years to pay the windows off. So I don't think that's ever an argument. Like, you can certainly let buyers know that, hey, maybe when it comes time to sell and you want to do it, but if you're staying forever and the windows are in good shape, I don't encourage people to replace just because they're 25 years old or because they're old and wood, and might require a little more maintenance. New vinyl windows are obviously nice, and the double hungs you can tip in and clean easier, but you're talking about $10,000 to replace windows. There really isn't an energy payoff. I'm gonna move my sheet to the other side so I can see better. So the next one we were going to talk about was plumbing. And I think plumbing and electrical, honestly, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC. So my next three, those are the most common questions I get from buyers. They're always worried about, oh, it's old pipes, or is the electrical all through the house old and do we have to replace it all? So we'll start with plumbing. Obviously new plumbing is fantastic. And if you see the PEX plumbing, the plastic plumbing, I'm a huge fan of that stuff. It's super efficient. It's easy to work on. It almost never gets restricted water flow. The only time I'm ever really worried about old plumbing is, well, number one, lead, but lead typically isn't in houses. That's typically just the run to the street. But really it's like the old cast iron. And what happens is an old cast iron, those rot from the inside out, basically. And so as they start to rot on the inside, the water pressure forces all the soot in the pipe to stay kind of stuck where it is mostly. But when you then shut off water to the house, like say there's a water main break and they shut off water to the house, then the water comes back on. All that sediment that was being stuck to the outside of the pipe because of the water pressure falls to the bottom of the pipe. And then when the water comes back through, it flushes it all through the house. And then it blocks up your shower heads, your faucets. You get a little bit of rusty water. So ultimately, the old cast iron, you could certainly talk with buyers about that being an upgrade they want to change at some point. For sure, home inspectors will make mention of that. But, replumbing, especially if it's exposed areas and basements, isn't terribly expensive. We had a client in a ranch in West Dallas recently, about a 1,200 square foot ranch, just replace all of his main runs. And I think it ran him like $1,400. And I think that's a quality upgrade. He got better water pressure. So I think for the cost, that's a no-brainer. The biggest, most expensive plumbing issue really that exists, and unfortunately it's not looked at probably 95% of the time, is the sewer lateral. And I'm bringing this up because I just had a client call me just 2 days ago. They just purchased their house a month ago. They had a home inspection done. Everything worked fine. Ran tons of water. It all drained just fine. There was a single guy who had occupied the house prior to my buyers, and my buyers are a family of 4. Well, they got in a couple weeks ago, they called me and said, hey, it just like stuff doesn't seem like it's draining as fast as it should. And they don't have any big trees in the front yard. And I remember that. And I'm like, all right, well, that's, probably isn't roots, maybe just a minor blockage in the sewer lateral. Well, as it turns out, the sewer lateral has collapsed. So, and it may have been collapsed for a long time because the old single guy that lived there, that's a couple of toilet flushes a day and 1 shower a day and some dishes. Well, now they're 4 people. So it's 4 showers and 10, 12, 14 toilet flushes, and they're, loads of laundry every single day. Well, now it started to back up, obviously. So these poor guys just saved their whole life for their 3% down payment in their 50s, late 40s, early 50s, 2 high school kids, and $18,000 to fix their sewer lateral, which they don't have. So I'm trying to help them, obviously, but the reason I'm bringing up is I guess when you get to the older homes, and if you're in the position where your sellers would not be able to afford something like that, I know there are some inspectors out there now who are offering sewer scoping. I think they're charging $125, $175 to get this scoped. It's something to be aware of and maybe suggest on an inspection here and there. you know, because like, I mean, I'm personally crushed because I love our buyers, and there's nothing I can do about it, and there was nothing we could have done to prevent it. And the home inspector did their job, and I was there for it. We ran tons and tons of water. Um, but now they're stuck, you know, they have to fix it. So they'll have to get some financing, and, you know, it's going to cost them $150 a month for 4 years, 5 years on a personal note to do this darn repair. So just something to be aware of. Again, I'm not even sure who does. I don't know if Home Team has sewer scoping. I think maybe House to Home. I think they had talked about it. I think Colasari. So I think Homesite might do it. Um, the equipment's expensive, so I think that's why a lot of inspectors don't do it, because the demand is really low. Like where, you know, a radon detector is like $500 and you charge 125 an inspection, those guys pay those off and make a lot of money on those. And they're almost every inspection. Well, I think the sewer scopes are like $2,000. And if they got 3 requests a year or 4 requests a year, you know, it's going to take them. So I think that's why most don't offer it, but something to be aware of. You know, obviously all plumbers have them. So you could call Ein or any of the big dogs out there. If there was any concern about water flowage in an inspection, you can certainly pay and have a third party come and do a sewer scope. Electrical. So the only, I'm not great on electrical stuff. I always, because my best man at my wedding, my best friend is a master electrician, so I let him stay smart on that stuff, and I don't pay much attention typically. But I do know, you know, obviously the big thing is the service itself. So the service isn't just the box on the wall. The box on, that's the panel. When you're talking about a service, it's the wires from the masthead outside the house into the house, the grounding wires. It's the whole kit and caboodle from where We Energy stops to where the owner starts inside the house. So services, an average service, I would say they're running 1,500 nowadays. In some cases, I'm seeing, you know, there's always a cheaper guy. Some electricians are doing them for 1,000 to 1,100, and there's certainly some bigger outfits that run them in the 2,000. And some of that has to do with, you know, how far do they have to run their ground? That's the most expensive part. That's still copper and very expensive. You know, if it's a 2-story house, the access to the masthead outside, there's a lot of variables that go into it, but a good reasonable number to throw out to folks is $1,500. And anytime anyone upgrades nowadays, you almost always see them go to a 200 amp as opposed to a 100 amp. And there's not a big cost difference there. It's a little different wire bringing the power in, and the panel itself is a little bit bigger because it can accommodate more circuits. Then interior wiring of a house. It's unusual that almost any of that really needs major upgrade or replacement. Like, it's unusual that you have to pull all the wiring through the walls out and replace. The biggest thing to always pay attention to when you're walking through a house, or if the home inspector is there, if you ever hear them say knob and tube, then there's a problem. Knob and tube needs to be abandoned immediately, and typically, actually for the first time, I'm surprised it wasn't, we just had an FHA deal closed, and there was knob and tube wiring, but it was dead. So it was disconnected and not working. And the FHA inspector allowed us to leave it in place. But like 99% of the time, even insurance companies, they just don't even want the old dead stuff there. They want it all torn out, throw it away. We don't want to see it. You know, obviously we made it through one once now where FHA inspector didn't mention, but knob and tube is super dangerous. That's basically just live wire all along its entire run, anywhere you touch it. And it used to be run so much in attics, like inches above loose blown insulation. It probably is responsible for burning down more houses than almost anything else out there. So be aware of knob and tube. It's super easy to spot yourself. The knobs, actually this is the knobs typically, but they're white, they're ceramic white, they're about that big. And then they'll have the wire literally be sitting partway through that knob. There's like a little cap on the knob that pulls down over the wire. And then the wire just running out in the open. If you ever see that, especially if you have FHA buyers, be aware that you're gonna have to have some repairs made. And if it's live, then they're gonna have to cut all that out, run new wiring through. And be aware at wording. So if you're on the buyer side and you ask for a service to be replaced, we caught one once where I always want to see the bid. So we wrote our amendment, said we wanted the electrical service upgraded. It had a particular panel that's really, there's been recalls on it. So I forgot it, Stab Lock. I'm forgetting the brand name. Something Pacific. I'll think of it. Federal Pacific. Federal Pacific is the brand name, and they had these they're called the Stab Lock panel, which is like you push button for the fuses. And so I know those had a recall, so I'm always aware that when we have buyers that we're going to ask for those to be replaced immediately because they are a safety hazard, and every home inspector is aware of them and will point them out. So it's not something you have to remember to look for. But we asked for the service to be upgraded, and the agent responded and said, "Oh, yeah, no problem. I've got my electrician. He's going to run and do it, quick tomorrow. The whole new panel will be in." And when she said new panel, I said, "Well, hold on. Just so it's a whole service, right?" And she said, yeah, of course, the panel, they're replacing the box. I said, "No, could you send me the bid, please, just so I can read it over?" It was $350. He wasn't replacing the service. It was a 60 amp service. He was just going to take a 100 amp box, throw it on the wall, and say it was replaced. So it wouldn't have fixed the grounding. It wouldn't have fixed the low amperage coming in the house to 60 amp. So just be aware, always ask for quotes or be able to review quotes. We don't put that parameter or that wording in our amendments for home inspection, but I kind of, now that I'm talking about it, I think we probably should start doing so. That we just want to review. We approve that they can do it with their contractor, but we would like to view the quotes. So in this case, the listing agent didn't even understand. She didn't understand what was wrong and why it didn't work. So I sent her to the West Allis electrical inspector, who helped her and the seller understand, and then we ultimately got the full service upgraded as we were supposed to. But be aware of that you have to watch out that difference in words, panel and service, is a big difference.
So Matt, are you saying 1,500 would cover
The whole service.
the exterior and interior?
Yeah, that'll get you from the masthead down into the house, and then they'll reconnect all the circuits in the house. That wouldn't be upgrading anything else in the house though. Like if they then have to add a bunch of GFCIs or anything like that, that would start to pile on top of that. And I'm not, actually, I think I just asked, so if it's an older house and it hasn't had a kitchen remodel, it hasn't had a bathroom remodel, so it doesn't have the GFCIs in the kitchen and bathroom, just because you're upgrading the service, that still doesn't mean then all the other electrical in the house has to come up to current code. Those outlets in the kitchen don't have to become GFCIs until a permit is pulled for kitchen work, at which point then the municipality will require you to upgrade the GFCIs. All now that would change from an old panel to a new panel is now any new panels that go in. And I'm sure people have started to see them, is there's a GFCI outlet like directly next to or under the panel. And that's a new requirement, that there's a GFCI grounded outlet right with the panel. So yeah, that $1,500 will just get you that new service.
Okay.
But then the rest of the stuff, and again, if you're on the buyer's side and the house needs a new service, and it's likely then if it needs a new service, it doesn't have GFCIs, well, then you might as well be asking for it as part of your amendment, because you're having the electrician come there anyways. And that's what I always do with my amendments. Like if I'm asking there's a big plumbing problem, then I'll throw in the other little plumbing issues, because the plumbers, it's more expensive to get the plumber there than for him to, do one new wax ring on a toilet and fix one leaky sink. It's not $380 because they're coming out just for two little things. That'll be another, one total hour of labor, which is still probably a lot. That plumbers are probably $150 an hour. But it just makes sense. So, we always try to group that stuff in our amendments. And so if there's this big plumbing issue and then 8 other little plumbing issues, I might say, hey, let's go for all the plumbing stuff and let's forget about these 3 GFCIs the inspector mentioned. You guys can do that yourselves. We always try to obviously be gentle as much as possible, but as I mentioned the first time, it makes a big difference if we paid $20,000 over list because we had to compete and win, or if this house has been sitting on the market for 8 months and they've done 4 price reductions, and now I'm offering them another 10,000 under their asking price. Then I let my buyers know, hey, we're kind of discounting this price and getting the house where we need to expect that there's some stuff that they're not going to fix and you're going to have to do the work, but it's okay because we're getting a good deal. HVAC system, we have a conversation frequently with clients, both on the sell and list side. And it's, well, yeah, the furnace is 26 years old. Sure, but it functions. Working is working. I'm 42 years old. I'm still working. Like I'm, at least Jen might disagree, but I'm not a trade-in or throwaway yet. But I try to make it anecdotal with them and say, guys, functioning is functioning, and we can't argue non-functioning. Maybe we can say, what I always try to push them to is, you bet, that stuff is old. Let's just get a home warranty on inspection. And as a side note, I try to keep home warranties out of our offers to purchase as much as possible because I like having the option of pulling them in as a negotiating tactic as part of home inspection. And, I guess if you have really unlikely that there's going to be any issues with home inspection, then go ahead and throw it on the offer. But I always like to be able to be like, you know what, it's okay, old furnace, old AC, let's go ahead and ask them for that home warranty that's going to cover you guys for the first year. It typically seems to work both ways. That way the seller's not upset that we're trying to ask them for a credit for a working old water heater and AC unit. And it makes the buyers happy because now they're getting this whole year of protection. With any home warranty, obviously you want to let your buyers know that that's not all insurance isn't perfect, and home warranties are no different. They're not perfect. It isn't the furnace goes, you just get a free fancy brand new 2000 or 2020 furnace. A lot of them cover the materials but not the labor. If they cover some of the labor, they won't cover if you have to change the plenum on the furnace and you have to do tin work or you have to change that. So just make sure that your buyers know that it's not a $0 event. Even after the, like the $100 deductible, there's still probably going to be some cost incurred. But the nice thing is, it's a heck of a lot less than if they didn't have the home warranty. But average furnace nowadays, I would say 2,700 to 3,500. And an AC unit would run about that same cost. So a full furnace and AC, I think a very fair number is 6,000 to 7,000 to upgrade that system entirely. Water heater isn't necessarily part of the HVAC system, but since it's mechanicals, I would say it kind of qualifies in that zone. In the realm of repairs, they're cheap. So 700 low end. And if they have, the other thing to be aware of is if it's a big house or any new constructions that have the big whirlpool tubs that we all decided we had to have, that we never use and just collects dust upstairs. Then they end up putting in like 75-gallon water heaters. Those get expensive really fast. We replaced ours last year, and I was shocked. It was $2,900 to replace my water heater. So just be aware that the big ones get expensive, but your average 40, 50-gallon gas or electric, electrics are cheaper to purchase, typically about $100 cheaper for the materials, but they are substantially more expensive to run. So I would always suggest anyone who has an electric water heater that you mention to your buyers that, hey, when this goes, it will be well worth your while to switch over to a gas. I don't think in most cases yet tankless is a really good answer. And I only know enough to be, I'm really dangerous with this, but what I understand is that those tankless heaters need a larger gas supply pipe. So by the time you're done paying, like the units themselves, maybe 1,500, and then maybe it's 1,000 to plumb in. So they're $2,500. They're not cheap, but obviously they're super efficient for your home because they don't have to continually keep 75 gallons of water hot. They're just heating it, flash burning it as it comes through a coil. But if you have to replace all the gas piping, the plumber I had talked to was, I looked at it when our water heater went, like it's another $1,000 to $1,500 to upgrade all the gas piping. So they can end up being like $4,000. So in most cases, those aren't an efficient answer. Just go with a typical water heater, $800 to $1,100, not a big deal. And my opinion is any water heater over 5 years old is in its last year of life, and every day thereafter is a gift. So I always tell my buyers, listen, once it's at 5 years, go ahead and start that. If you stash money in envelopes for home repairs or whatever you do, start stashing money. You're going to need a water heater soon. Driveway, patio, garage was the next thing I had down. And really there, I'm just talking about flat work, flat concrete work. The most expensive is a garage floor. And we obviously see those heaved and broken frequently all around the area. The garage floor is just more expensive because obviously they've got a structure to work in and around. An average 2-car garage floor. And so this is like picture frame is, I think, the common term they use. So it means they're cutting the floor out right at the foundation edges on the inside of the garage. You would expect a 2-car garage to be about $4,000. And so when you look at cost per square foot, that's actually quite expensive. Then like patio or driveway, I think now a pretty reasonable rate is about $7, $7.50 a square foot to replace concrete. So just keep that number in the back of your head. It also helps when because I feel like almost every client always looks at the patio at a house and is like, ooh, we want to make that bigger. And I bet we're going to hear that a lot more now with COVID and everyone having to use their own patio space and not go out. So I talk frequently with clients about patios and adding on, and I always quote them at that $7.50 to $8 a square foot price. Obviously, sometimes what you're dealing with is just heaving and mud jacking, and I have yet in almost 100 transactions to ever have a client need mud jacking until one just from an inspection this weekend. So I don't have great pricing, but I think a small slab, say a piece of sidewalk that's on the approach to the front of the house and it's causing a trip hazard, I think like $200 to $250 is pretty common. And I actually think they don't even call it mud jacking anymore because I think most of the guys don't actually use like concrete mud anymore. I think they use more, it's like an expanding foam now. Walkways are more expensive if you're replacing walkways. So if a whole walkway needs to be replaced at some point, that's not going to be that $7.50 or $8 a square foot. It'll probably be more like $10 or $11 a square foot. So you can keep that in mind. And I'm going to go through the last couple here, and then people can just ask questions as needed. Chimneys are crazy expensive, especially if they need rebuilding. They can run, a chimney quote can get to $10,000 in a heartbeat. So I think a really good thing when you're walking buyers around houses is to always get a look at that chimney. And if you see that the brick is like spalding coming off in pieces around the chimney, it's always a good note just to make mention. And of course, this all applies to sellers too. So if you do a walk around of the house of your seller, it's really nice to mention, oh, hey, it looks like your chimney may have some issues up there. Maybe we should get a quote and be proactive. And that way an $8,000 repair doesn't kind of, hit them, crush them after accepting an offer and then getting the home inspection. So chimneys are definitely expensive repairs. It's not often that they need to be rebuilt. Most commonly now what we're seeing need to be done, and we're going to see this a lot and a lot more, is the orphaned chimney scenario where the furnace has been upgraded and it's high efficiency. And so the furnace doesn't vent up the chimney anymore. And now only the water heater vents up the chimney. And you can't do that without the chimney then being lined. So it's called an orphan chimney. It just means that there's one gas-fired appliance venting up the chimney. And the issue is that when both vented up the chimney, they created enough heat to dry any of the moisture they were creating, like in the winter, because that heat inside the chimney just creates its own little bit of moisture. Now with just a water heater, it's not created, those don't create enough heat anymore. And so you're getting moisture into the mortar, then the mortar, that moisture expands, it cracks it out during the winter, and the chimney starts to fall apart. So what we see a ton now is those orphan chimneys. And I think a very fair chimney concept, they're about $575 to put a chimney liner in. So that's a really, really common repair. And we're going to see, again, we're going to see it continually more and more because more and more people are upgrading furnaces.
Can you say that price again?
$575.
For an orphan chimney?
Yeah.
To be lined?
Yeah, to line the chimney with, it's just like, it's like a metal B-vent. They just slide a vent down.
Yeah, I would say $575 at a very high end. I would say shop it because there's contractors out there that'll do it for less. I had a deal in West Dallas where they were the buyer was trying to convince the seller was trying to convince the seller to take out the chimney entirely and redo the roof and all. And we got this huge astronomical quote. And we ended up talking him down when saying, keep the chimney, just put the liner in.
Just put a liner in. Yep.
Yeah. And not the entire roof didn't have to be redone, stuff like that. So.
Oh yeah, no,
yeah.
no. You know, but you bring up a good point though, man. Is like, but if you're in the position where it's an orphan chimney, and this is a really old house, and they're going to be replacing the roof, well then have the roofer just pull the chimney into the attic space. That's one less. I love less holes in roofs, even if they're flashed. So less holes are a great thing. So that is another option, obviously. The only issue would be is then you would have to upgrade the water heater if that hasn't already been upgraded. So you'd have to go to a direct vent water heater because you don't have a chimney to vault down anymore. And yeah, my price at $575, it's just because they're super reliable and they're well. And we have a client who works for Chimney Concepts. Yeah, that's Chimney Concepts, and they're not the cheap guy out there by any stretch of the imagination. And it doesn't have to be a chimney company. Most HVAC companies also will run out and do liners. So, you know, like any of the big HVAC companies. So you can quote between, even some roofers I think are doing them. So roofers, chimney contractors, or HVAC contractors, all of them can put in a chimney liner.
And if it's a big enough house, you know, and if I could see it just from the sidewalk, I look up at the actual crown around the chimney too, as well as the cap. Because even the terracotta around the caps and the crowns, those will even get flagged in inspection too.
Yep. That's definitely, and they do. I mean, chimneys once that chimney starts to get that lean and needs to be rebuilt, I mean, it's like $1,000 per foot of rise on a pretty standard side chimney to rebuild them. Jen and I had to do that to the first house we ever bought. And we were expecting just some tuck pointing to solve it, but it wasn't going to. So it was $11,000 by the time we had to and that was, but again, that's, you know, that was a 1920s colonial natural fireplace side chimney off the house that then was 12 feet above the roof line. So it was a really expensive rebuild to make it look right. So they're not all going to be that expensive. But I mean, we had clients on a smaller house in Whitefish Bay that needed 4 feet replaced, and it was going to be $8,300. So chimneys are pricey. So then I get to our last, I'm going to combine mold and odors. Mold's reasonable to get rid of. And what I'll say is I have yet to ever have anyone come test for mold. If a home inspector points out a mold-like substance, it is so common that it actually is, that instead of spending $275 to have a company come test the mold, tell you that it's mold, and then charge you another $500 to abate it, we always just ask for it to be remedied. We don't ask for a test. We operate on the assumption it's mold, and I haven't yet. I'm sure someday we will, but I haven't yet had a homeowner on the sell side for with my buyers. Haven't yet had somebody push back against that, because mold is such a scary word to everybody out there now. So we always just ask for the repair, and most commonly it's under $1,000. If a whole attic was full of mold and it was getting into the insulation, then mold issues can start to get really expensive, especially if obviously then it starts to climb down into the drywall. Because once it's gotten to the drywall, it means that there's probably mold on the studs behind the drywall. So you can end up with an extraordinarily, and that's the super rare occurrence. Most commonly, it's those darn, not well ventilated spaces in attics, just on the underlayment of the roof. It's on the plywood. Or the next most common thing is the good old didn't vent the bathroom fan outside and it's just sitting under the roof in the attic. And that warm water from the bathroom then of course causes a little spot of mold. So I've got mold on my list as an expensive thing, but most commonly, again, you're going to be at $500 or less. Odors is a whole different story. Julia Kellogg, I know, I'm sure she doesn't mind me sharing, she recently had a deal fall completely apart due to smoke. There was a smoker in the home. They used multiple ozone machines. Jen and I actually bought one a few months back for a listing we had because the former owner had smoked, and they actually do a pretty good job typically. We just sold a house across the street from us where we had to have that discussion with our sellers. They foster dogs. The house reeked of dog. There's no question that they had 4 dogs in that house. And so, once the odors sink into stuff, you're repainting, you're reflooring. So that's why I have it in here as an expensive item, because by the time you refloor a 1,500 square foot house and you have to repaint the entire inside of it, even if you do the paint yourself, you're $750 in paint. And then you're, I don't know, $4 a square foot's a pretty reasonable average for flooring. That's probably low. Probably more like, $6 a square foot for flooring. So $6,000 for a 1,000 square foot house. So be aware of odors and what they'll cost. And typically on the buyer side, the buyers are just going to walk out of the house and not buy it. But on the sell side, it's something, and it's such an uncomfortable conversation. But you have to have it. You're not doing your job as an agent if you don't point those things out to your seller, because ultimately, why would you want to take all your time and effort and put a house on the market that stinks that you're never going to sell? So have those conversations, get some pricing put in place, maybe get a quote for a carpet, offer a credit to have all the carpet replaced, something like that has worked for us. And ultimately we sold the house across the street, and new buyers just, day one, there was a carpet layer and a professional painting company, and they painted everything and carpeted everything. But odors can get expensive, so be aware of those. My last thing I had was well, water, and septic. And that's obviously, for some of us, something that we see really frequently. So for Jen and I, we see it really commonly because we're a bit north and live a little more country-ish. So a lot of the listings and houses up here have septic well and septic to well systems. And I'm just going to give you the general. It's really uncommon you have to actually dig an entire new well. But, an average well, if anyone ever asks, like, what if I have to replace the well? Probably $7,500 to $9,000. But most commonly, it's like the pressure tank that's gone or the well pump that's gone. Those items, those are the main mechanical pieces for well systems, which if you're doing a deal with a well and you're asking for a home warranty, remember that those are items you need to add on. But all home warranty programs do have well, water, and septic options to add those things on. So just be aware that you don't miss those if you're doing a home warranty for something like that. But well pump, $1,200. Pressure tank, $1,200. And then the third thing is your water test. If it comes back with arsenic, nitrates, arsenic and nitrates are solved with reverse osmosis. So $1,200. and then septic systems, they vary greatly, but a good starting number is $20,000. So if their septic system has failed and it needs to be replaced, just starts expensive and doesn't get any cheaper after that. But again, really unusual that those systems have failed entirely, unless it's an original system in the house. They should last 35 years. And that is my entire list. So does anyone have questions and about anything home inspection?
I have a quick question about the windows.
Yeah.
So do you have any experience cost-wise as to what it is to do seal replacement on double panes? Rather than replacing an entire window, you see moisture in between the panes during the inspection.
Yeah, so if the windows, and again, it's like, I swear, I see more windows fail that are newer windows, like the 10-year-old windows, the vinyls that fail and lose their seals. So I know for a fact on those, and those are, those newer vinyl double hungs are really easy to pop the window right out of the sash. Those ones that fold in, they literally just pop right out, and you can take those right to somewhere like Lisbon Storm and Screen, and about $80. Except now, I just heard the other day, who was it? Oh, a Home Team Inspections. He said that Lurie Glass will come and do them on site, in-house, between like $60 and $80 a window. So you don't even have to pop it out and take it to them.
Who is that?
So Lurie, Lurie, I think it's Lurie Glass.
Okay.
I've never used them, but that's Home Team. What's his name? Ian from Home Team suggested.
Okay, because I had just had a deal where we ended up dealing with Lisbon on it. So we had actually ordered, the sellers had to order through Lisbon.
Yep.
And then have a separate contractor actually come in and do the actual
the glass
work.
in.
Yeah.
And how much did they charge by the time it was done for a window?
I'd have to look. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I know Jen and I sold a rental that was the original house we lived in that we just didn't sell when we built about a year and a half ago. And that had 2 windows that had lost seals. And I know it was about $145 for both of those. But I drove them to Lisbon, dropped them off, picked them up about 4 days later, and they had been resealed and fixed. So I know it should be around 80 to $100 a window.
For a standard double hung.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're, because if you try to call them to get a quote, they'll say, like, I know Bob's out in Waukesha will say, nope, I need to know the exact measurement of the window. Well, you're already out of the property. How are you going to get that if you have a seller that's kind of being a little bit belligerent at that point?
No, right. That can be difficult. So, I mean, then, I would estimate it and try to get obviously if it's a big picture window, then yeah, it can get really expensive. I would bet, a 4-foot by 6-foot picture window, you probably are going to start to be more like $500 to $700.
Yeah.
But to replace that whole window itself could run $1,500 to $1,800. So to get the glass put in is fine as long as the rest of the window's okay.
Right.
Anybody else? Any questions? I think, well, if no one has questions, then I say we get out of here.
We're done a little bit early.
Yeah, I'll take that.
But very helpful information as always, Matt. I sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah,
no problem. Of the things that you mentioned touched on deals that I've really had some sticky situations with in the past and really could have used your knowledge at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like just this morning, Julie Davidson had asked a question, and I'm always available. Like, I'm happy to read an inspection report or help somebody with wording or decipher what's the right, because like this morning, Julie David, I think her question was, there was a Palmer valve that was like, it was working, but it was really sticky and not moving freely. And so she wanted to know, like, well, but what if in the process of them fixing that, they break it, then what wording do I put in that makes sure that they then instead go and put a sump pump and a sump crack in the house? So like, I'm always available to help or give some ideas on what wording we should do or how we should phrase something. Because you never know what kind of an agent you're going to run up against and what they're going to want to argue with you about. And I think we've all found at some point in our careers that one wrong word or not being as specific as you humanly can cost us money. You know, if I goof up and say I don't word it right, then suddenly I'm paying for a sump pump for my client.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. The wording, the communication with the co-broke and the niceties and just being nice. Two, even just to Matt's point, the wording. We had a deal for our sellers in Port Washington a few years ago where Matt and we always think we're so super careful and specific on our wording, but we had mentioned that a roof needed to be replaced in our amendment. And once we got to the point of it getting replaced in the quotes and we were almost to the closing table, we assumed that they knew that we wanted the garage roof replaced too, or I don't remember which property that was. And they said, no, you didn't put in the amendment that it was the garage roof too.
That was
or was that cut A? Oh, yeah, that was, okay. But we've had a couple, so it's if the garage is separate and just being so specific with your wording and your amendments and not, you know, when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, right? So it's just being so super specific because we got into this, you know, argument with the other side because we wanted he wanted the garage replaced as well. So just being super careful with that.
The amendment said, replace failed roof. And, but the garage and the house, it was a detached garage. Both had failed roofs. So when we let that go out, we're like, well, failed is failed. And the seller is like, nah, sorry, that just means house. And we're like, no, it doesn't. But because it's a detached structure, I think what ended up, what won it was the word premises existed somewhere. And we got lucky that the word premises, because both the garage and the house were on the premises that was being sold. So that's what saved us in that argument. But still, if we ever did it again, we would say, very specifically say, to include house and detached garage. Or maybe sometimes you don't need a detached garage, but then I would specifically, eliminate the detached garage.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even when you're walking through with your buyers and you even see you're looking at a home that say has like a 3-season room on the back, you have to take into consideration that composition of that 3-season room is different than the composition of the roof. So that's not, and you can't see that easily when you're walking through, but you don't know how old that rubber roof is on the top of a 3-season room either.
Correct. And if you ask for that roof on that house to be replaced, you could have someone who would argue with you that if you only said replace the roof, they get a quote for the shingled areas of the roof and don't do, say, the rubber portion of the roof.
Yep.
So then when you write that amendment, you want to say to include flat roofing also, or to include asphalt, or to include all areas with roof. It's so, and only agents that feel like fighting will want to fight that. With most of the rest of us would be like, no, that makes total sense. I agree with that. But the issue is you can't ever trust the agent on the other side to be as well-meaning as we are. And it's certainly caught Jen and I a couple of times. So we frankly, we don't assume anyone is kind-hearted and well, not that anyone isn't. But we make very sure we are very specific and detailed with the repairs we request. So if it's a new agent, man, don't stop having people look at your home, especially your home inspection amendments, just because you're through 5 deals. Like, I would find an agent that's willing to work with you and do it for your first 20, because we made mistakes on number 40. So just be really diligent. Vigilant, I guess is a better word, on your home inspection amendments, that when you're asking for a repair, there are no questions what you are telling them to do and how you're telling them to do it.
Yeah, find your people, especially once you get past the launch program and you graduate. I mean, I'm on the reason why Matt knew about the Julie text is because I'm on a text string with 6, 7 other people because we were all in the Jay Schmidt group together 4 years ago, and we still ask questions. We still double check ourselves. We still say, how would you word this? We still, you know, so that it's so important to have that group of people that you can count on. And, you know, and Matt's not on that group text. It's me and 7 other people from J. Schmidt, but a lot of times I end up handing my phone over to him just because he has a way with the wording. And so he's, you know, super helpful and always willing to help with that for sure.
Mm-hmm. And that goes for anybody. Like, grab my email, shoot me an email, say, oh my gosh, I had a home inspection today. I don't know what to do. I will read through the report and we can do a quick call and discuss what makes the most sense.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Because
this is
usually
the
I
fun
end
part
up
for
reaching
me.
out to Cindy.
Yeah.
I'll be like, Cindy, I'm stuck. I don't know how to word this.
Yeah, no,
Looks like our
yeah,
furnace guy's
I'm
here.
totally, I'm happy to do it. So our furnace guys here?
Yep. So we will
Well,
make sure
that's
this
perfect timing.
was recorded. So Allison will get this into YouTube at some point. I wasn't on Matt's part 1 call. I don't see that that's in YouTube yet on the YouTube channel. So I will have to make sure that, you know, that was recorded and make sure Allison gets that, because there's very few people from the program on right now. And I want to make sure that everyone can go back and listen to these. So good deal.
Sounds good.
Any
Thank
other
you
questions?
again.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Take care, guys.
All right, yeah, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.